what I'd like to do is take some questions from anybody who has a question after you. I know it's freezing. Everybody probably wants to get back. I know I'm holding up the vital logistics work of Europa, and I apologise again for being late. Or rather, I blame Southeast Trains again. Can we go to anybody from the audience who wants to ask a question? Then I'll go to members of the media. Anybody got a question? Yes. I do. I think that the only way to get a better deal, the tragedy is that we didn't get any real reform. Everybody knows it. We didn't get any real change. The bureaucracy continues unstopped, unabated, and the only way to get the change we need is to, as Andrew said earlier on, say, right, that's it. We've had enough. It's time. This thing's 50 years old. It's going in the wrong direction. It's time for change. It's time for real reform. The only way to get that is to vote leave. Yes, sir. No, thank you. The question was, what about the Russians and the threats from Putin and that kind of thing? Listen, that is a very serious question, and obviously much of our security for the last 70 years has been guaranteed by the relationship with America and the NATO nuclear umbrella. That's very, very important. That will remain whatever happens. But of course, cooperation with our European friends and partners can continue to be done, but at an intergovernmental level. It always has been done in that way. I mean, I have to say it hasn't always been brilliantly successful. I remember the Belgians refused to sell us ammunition during the first Gulf War, for instance. The membership of the EU didn't seem to count for much then. But you can cooperate at an intergovernmental level and produce agreements, for instance, on sanctions against Iran. There's no reason why that shouldn't be done. The problem with the EU is not the cooperation between governments. It's the huge growth in bureaucracy, the expensive and wasteful growth in bureaucracy caused by the whole supranational system, and that's what we need to get out of. Yes. Sorry, I totally missed that. The downsides. Look, I don't think there are any substantial downsides. I really don't. I've thought about this a long time. I think the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, so to speak. I think there's a sort of, and even fear isn't particularly scary at the moment. I think there's a huge opportunity now. Do free trade deals. Believe in ourselves. We're a great country. We're the 5th biggest economy in the world. Don't listen to the people who keep running us down. We can achieve a huge amount. I just think that we could produce a great lesson for Europe in throwing off a lot of the stuff that I think is wasting people's money and wasting people's time. The reasons for the whole European Union now are no longer economic, they are entirely political, and I think they're making the political problems worse rather than better. That's my view. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, hang on a sec. Yeah, you go first, then I'll come to you. Look, the question is about what's the relation between sterling and the euro. I think that sterling and the euro will continue to fluctuate as they always have done, but sterling will reflect the long-term health and strength of the UK economy, and trade flows and investment flows and people's willingness to buy UK products, to invest in the UK and in UK services like this one. And I think that the more we can get rid of the regulation, the red tape, the cost of the EU, the better we'll do and the more we'll thrive, and the more robust our currency will be. The most sensible thing we've done, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, I don't want to sound, virtually the only sensible thing Gordon Brown ever did, I don't want to insult the guy, but was to stay out of the euro. And by the way, a lot of the people who are now saying that it would be a disaster for us to leave are the very same people who said it would be a disaster for us not to join the single currency. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. Hashtag wrong then, wrong now, folks. They got it totally wrong. Mandelson, the CBI, the lot of them, and including some of my beloved friends, I'm afraid to say, in the Conservative Party. But never mind, we draw a veil over that. Yes, sorry, question about Scotland. Look, 2 points there. The first is I think actually the polls in Scotland in the last few months have moved. They moved 5% in the direction of the Leave campaign. Secondly, we had it's far from clear what Scotland would actually do. Secondly, the Scottish people had a decisive referendum only a couple of years ago. That was a once-in-a-generation moment to choose whether to remain part of the UK. They chose to remain in the UK, quite right too. I don't think that's coming around anytime soon again, and why should it? The other, people might ask themselves the question, what would happen if Scotland voted Leave and England voted to stay, which is certainly possible, and the answer to that is nothing. There would be it would make no, whatever the UK decided would happen, and that's the right answer. Yes. Private hire vehicles and Uber. I wish well, now listen. It is a very. I'm just trying to think of some convoluted way in which I can blame Uber and the problems of private hire vehicles on. I'm sure there is abundant European legislation, but I can't produce on the top of my head. What we are doing on private hire vehicles, quite seriously, is we're bringing forward all sorts of attempts to make a level playing field for the black cab trade, which we believe in and which we want to support, as well as a strong private hire trade. And that means having English language tests, it means having geography tests, and we're now consulting on having a congestion charge for private hire vehicles coming into the centre of town, because as you know, the numbers of private hire vehicles have massively increased. They've gone up from about 50,000 to about 95,000 in the last couple of years. They will of course apply to Uber drivers, absolutely, Uber alles, absolutely. Any other questions from any? Yes. EU. Well, if you think about it, we get this. There's £10 billion. You saw these letters from scientists and people saying what a shame it would be because they get all these grants. Actually, that's UK money anyway. All that money would keep coming, and support for farmers would keep coming, but you'd have another £10 billion a year, £10 billion a year, which you could spend on great stuff for this country. And it would be up to us, be up to the people of this country to decide. Should it go on the NHS? Should it go on other things for the betterment of this country? I think many people would think it should. And that is the way forward. So there'd be a net gain of £10 billion a year at least. And I'm not, sorry, yes, one more here. No, I don't think that would be necessary, because what I think we should do is strike a new free trade deal on the lines of what Canada has just achieved. They've taken out the vast majority of the tariffs. They have virtually unencumbered trade now. We want a relationship based on trade and cooperation, and I think the idea of being subject to the single judicial system is the problem. So that's the way forward for us, I think. Yes, please. Harriet.
Sky News. 2 questions for you.
Yes.
The first, how did you manage to woo the Queen and what she said to you in private conversations?
How did I manage to
woo the Queen onto your side?
Woo the Queen?
What she said to you in private conversations. The second question, Justin Welby talking about migration. Can we assume that he is also someone that you've been trying to get onto your side of the argument?
Right. Well, listen. On Her Majesty, I think the most important thing is she is completely above politics, isn't she? She should have absolutely nothing to do with it. She shouldn't be dragged in. And I certainly don't know what her views are. I do know that she's very much in favour of the new Elizabeth line, i.e. Crossrail, and she wore a very nice purple, purple dress at the launch, to go with the new livery of the Elizabeth line. As for the Archbishop of Canterbury, I don't know what the Bible says on this issue. I pray. I think prayer is probably a good way. If we don't yet, I think prayer is all that's going to be left if we fail to vote Leave on June the 23rd. And I'm sure he will lead the nation in prayers. But I hope that won't be necessary. because I think looking and listening to people as I have been over the last few weeks, I think people are increasingly coming around to our way of thinking and thinking this country is big enough and great enough and strong enough to stand on our own. Yes, John.
Boris, a couple of quick questions. But first of all, the polls suggest that you are the man, after David Cameron, most likely to swing votes in this referendum.
I think that's highly unlikely.
As well as being the man most likely to take over from David Cameron. So is it so unjust for some of your colleagues to say that you're in this for Britain, but also for Boris?
No.
What's wrong with wanting to lead the country into the bright future that you're describing this morning?
Can I just say how deeply is that your only question?
Well, I have another, but do
how deeply disappointing it is, John, that you've tackled Southeast trains, you've come all the way here, you've stood with these wonderful people here in Europa, and all you can ask about is this narrow question of personality politics. What people, and listen, it's interesting, people genuinely want to discuss the issue. They want to know whether we would be better off out. They want to know how that would happen. They want to know why that would happen. I believe that we would be better off out. I want to explain to people why we'd be better off out, and we've only got a few months to do it. So the less time we spend on that sort of thing, the more time we have to. I'm getting some people are nodding here, John. So I think the more time we have to talk about the issues that matter to people.
And when the Prime Minister Boris says that you and others campaigning to leave the European Union are willing to take a risk, that you're willing to see a loss of jobs or a risk to investment and growth as a price worth paying, have they got a point? Because you are, at the very least, seeing it as a gamble worth taking, aren't you, Boris?
I think the gamble, I genuinely think now, if you look at what is happening in the EU, and you look at the plan to continue with the efforts to prop up the single currency, with an ever denser system of integration, with more and more regulation about all sorts of social and economic issues that will impact directly on this country, will cause us to be involved in bailouts of the euro, as we've seen over the last few months, I think the risk is increasing in staying in the project. And I think the best thing we can do is show a lead, show an example, and strike out for freedom. And
you didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.